There are multiple studies that show productivity increases despite like cutting time spent working or days in office. So just knowing that kind of information and applying it to my work has been extremely beneficial, knowing that you can still have an effective team, a passionate, enthusiastic team without being so demanding.
Welcome to What Works, where nonprofit leaders share real stories about what makes impact possible. I'm your host, Marla Moody, a transformational leadership coach and author, and I'm passionate about helping teams stay healthy, know where they're going, and just really be able to excel. And today's episode is all about healthy teams actually getting more done. I'm joined today by Deanna Wilken, nonprofit executive leader and operations expert, which I love, who brings over 15 years of experience building and leading high impact organizations. And if you've ever wondered whether investing in healthy team really does drive results, this conversation is for you. So get ready. Deanna, please come and tell us what works. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Marla. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy that we were able to touch base before this call. I have a lot of things to say, given my experience, but I know you can bring out some more questions, things I haven't even considered. I am founder and president of Human Rights Research Center. I also am the co-founder and COO of Unruled Masses, and I volunteer with Amnesty International USA on their nominating committee. So I keep quite busy involved in the nonprofit space.
Before we even get into anything, with those different pieces, which is a lot, what's something that has stood out to you in that space?
Well, there have been a lot of changes, especially under the new administration here in the US. It's really impacted a lot of nonprofits. You see a lot of funding being withdrawn. See a lot of internal structure and restructuring of that nonprofit space. And I've seen that with my organizations that I've been working with. It's not easy. It takes existing challenges and exacerbates them. But what I've noticed as a positive in the past year in the nonprofit space is people want to be more involved now than ever. Given the challenges, they see a need to give back. My nonprofit Human Rights Research Center, going forward, we call it HRRC as the acronym. We are a volunteer-run, volunteer-led organization, and we've seen a huge increase in applications for people wanting to be involved and make a difference. So you're seeing pros and cons to the changes of the political environment here in the US.
Yeah. You mentioned the difference between misinformation and disinformation and how leaders can better inform, their donors, the citizens, different advocates. Could you touch on that just a little bit before we move on to healthy teams?
Yes, absolutely. I think if you've ever been online, you're aware of misinformation and disinformation, but not necessarily what the difference is. And how to identify it is even more challenging. So, misinformation is basically you're misinformed. Someone tells you something and they didn't know that they didn't have the facts, that this is what they heard, this is what's true. So they tell someone else and they take that information and tell someone else. It's intent. Disinformation has malicious intent. It's meant to spread false narratives. It's meant to sow disorder and change opinions. So this affects everyone across all levels. You see it in policymaking, you see it in nonprofits, government agencies, and the corporate space for profit. People are directly impacted by this because you're taking this knowledge and you're thinking, oh, I got this from a friend who I really trust or a business partner I really trust. But where did they get that information? And so we're perpetuating some of these false narratives, false information, and it's doing really, really bad damage into not only the workspace, but our products, civil society. Just you see it pervading every area.
So, what would a suggestion be for people as they're receiving news. Like, one thing I do is I try to go and listen to the actual interview or the actual report. Like, I try to listen to the people actually doing the speaking. That's something I learned personally. But what are some suggestions you have to help make sure that what we're believing and acting on is as accurate as we can get rather than maybe trailing off of a disinformation piece?
It's learning what a credible source is and how to identify one. This is not only challenging to understand credible sources, but not everyone wants to take that extra step to confirm the information they're reading because they trust that source and taking it at face value. But it's so critical to identify who the source is, who published it, who's the author, is there any bias? Do we know the bias? Is it left-leaning or right-wing? What is the information being used for? Is it informative versus persuasive? And what other sources are they using to get that information out? Is the information current? Did they pull from sources that were cited 30 years ago or 30 days ago? That makes a huge difference, having that historical insight of like what they're actually referencing. So those are just a few of the ways to identify a credible source. Ask yourself these questions. It's so important that people ask. There's no wrong question. It's looking at something like, oh, this fits my narrative, but is it actually true? I've even had challenges identifying something that was true because this goes on to the AI conversation that you and I discussed previously. It's like, that makes it even more challenging. I saw a video of these adorable dogs that looked like they were escaping a meat market, but the video wasn't, I mean, the video was real, but the story was false. I own up to it though. I I make sure to say, "Oh, I posted this without doing my due diligence. I'm sorry." But they're still cute dogs. It's just important to, if you make a mistake, own up to it. There's so much information out there and we don't necessarily see it as easily, especially in the advent of AI, but just asking
Yeah.
yourself the questions as well.
Yeah, it's weird because, like, we're busier than ever. We're inundated by information. And you mentioned it. It's like there is that bias, right?
Mhm.
I'm more likely to believe something that fits my narrative, that fits my value system. AI, if there's anything that feels a little off, believe that little off and do the due diligence. I wanted to start with that because it's such a real thing right now that we're dealing with when it comes to even the concept. What we're going to get into is the healthy teams. I love the fact that you're saying, let's just own up to it. What's the most healthy way of having a healthy team is building trust. And part of that is just saying, yeah, I blew it.
And that's fair. Like you said, it does take that extra time, and not everyone wants to take that extra time. If when you're seeing so much content like thrown at you, it's like, how do you take time to verify everything out there? And there have been times where I saw something and I didn't have the time to verify, but I wanted to share it. And the way I shared it is adding a comment saying, I haven't done the research into this, but if it's true, this is amazing. So even just prefacing that, saying, I
Hmm.
haven't done my research, but if this is true, this is amazing. Again, ownership. That's so important because you don't want to just put out the statement, this is amazing, this is happening. It's like, then someone else shares it and it goes on and on.
And not to have too much of a side note, but I'm in a writing club and we'll take articles from really established magazines like, the Wall Street Journal or something where they're credible people, and we dissect those because it's like just because someone's in a certain position doesn't necessarily mean it's accurate information.
Exactly.
And it takes a lot of work to do it, but I can't see these people as 100% authority, even though they're in a position of authority in light of their writers for a big organization.
Yeah. And another note, like on that point, is how things are going now. You're seeing people buying out different media groups. And now
Yes.
the biases are shifting. So what used to be more reliable isn't necessarily reliable now because it's shifted ownership. And that impacts the content that's being put out. It impacts the writers. While they may be credible, their work is being scrutinized. It's having not necessarily a different narrative, but maybe twisting that perspective a bit to fit particular narrative.
Well
So,
said. Thank you. I want to
yeah.
pause that conversation because there's going to be more of that, I think, in a future one.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to get to that idea of healthy teams, taking the time to really develop a team and communicate well and things like that really will give you a higher ROI. To put something in, you're going to get more results. I know I've been guilty of having a new person come on and you feel that pressure of, well, I have to do their work while I'm onboarding them before I ever get outcome. And there's that pressure of not wanting to do it well. So I really do want to dive into this arena. And I want to start with the fact that you went from an organization that had 7 volunteers to 128
Yes.
volunteers. So there's something that grew. So there's both the reason it did, there's something good there, and the growth pains from that. And I want to point it out. So let's start with the idea of the difference between a volunteer based organization and an organization that has staff that are compensated financially. So could you give me just a little some distinctions there of why that's even important to look at?
It's important to look at because it's motivation. I find that volunteers are there for a reason. They don't have to give their time. As a volunteer leader, I value that. I make sure it's known that we appreciate that time, but also make sure it's known that we're flexible because they're volunteers. They have their lives outside of that. We're not putting a 9 to 5 commitment on them. Just making sure that they get the work done is so important. We prioritize communication. That's our number one requirement is communicate with us. If you can't meet a deadline, let us know. We have so many people who can step in. We can shuffle things around. It's so important that you just tell someone. Otherwise, we're just left hanging and things don't get done. And it's a detriment to the organization and the other volunteers. It took a while to build our base, but I think given the conversations we have, the openness, the flexibility, we have a high retention rate. That's why we're at the number that we're at. We've had people
Yeah.
with us for years now volunteering. We've had people who left to grad school and came back after grad school because they wanted to continue volunteering. And we allow that. We have a bunch of passionate people. And not to say that compensated staff aren't passionate. It's just you see a different work style, work input, and you see like better morale in a volunteer organization because of how that well-being is managed. When you look at the other organizations I've been with who compensate as staff, you see often burnout, and you know this from working in the nonprofit space, is quite common.
Hmm.
Burnout, morale can be low. There's stagnation at times with not only like salaries, but also responsibilities and promotions just because there's no growth opportunity. And sometimes you just see very high turnover because of it. That's what challenge I have as a director of operations because operations isn't just making sure the organization is functioning, it's making sure that everyone's happy, everyone's getting what they need, the support, whether that's the tools they need or the mental well-being, like having that prioritizing your health, taking more time off, having flexibility and accommodations, having an active listener, someone who advocates for you. And I think that's what a director of operations does. We wear many hats. It's not just the functioning of the organization. You're looking at HR, finance, so many different things. Culture is a huge part of operations. If you can't meet the staff where they're at, they can't further the mission. Operations can often be overlooked as a critical component of an organization. Once I got into this kind of role, I didn't want to leave. I like bringing order to the chaos and making sure everyone can move forward towards the mission.
Operations is about mitigating risk. It's about building stability, but it's not administrative. It really is creative ways to find the best ways to do things. It's not just about systems. It really is about human-centered approach of systems.
Yes.
So, when we talk about communication, there's so many elements to that. Communication is hard. It takes purposefulness. I don't know how many times I've heard, well, I emailed them, they haven't gotten back to me. And this idea that you have a way of communicating, and for some reason that's not resonating with the other team. So, in the concept of communication and doing it well, we can talk about systems or purposefulness or whatever, but I'd love some of your ways you've seen success actually happen, that two-way conversation.
The most important thing of communication is knowing that not everyone communicates the same way.
Mm,
And once you learn that personalities play a role in that communication, then you'll have less frustration. It's learning how it, meeting someone where they're at, like trying to find that compromise of communication. If you meet someone who is completely opposite in the way of communicating and you're like so frustrated, it's like, okay, well, they're different. That's okay that they're different. Let's just talk, like figure out how we can communicate together. What's going to get us to this point so we can be efficient and functional? That's what it comes down to. In general, showing that proactiveness in communication, like that you want to understand them, that you want to be able to communicate and make things function, goes a long way. People appreciate that. They see that you're trying to work with them. And it's not always easy. I'm sure you know, like that
yeah,
human element of dealing with so many different personalities, it can be a challenge, but it can be overcome. I've experienced that with a lot of different personalities. A part of the operational role is also communicating externally, which can be even more challenging because you have your own dynamics within the workspace, but then you have to translate your communication externally to stakeholders that aren't necessarily on the same page as you and aren't willing to work in the same way. I think in general, it brings two components to this conversation of like team health. It's like you can manage your team really effectively. You can have this great dialogue and build this understanding, this culture of communication. But when you try to do that externally and it's not necessarily coming out in how you expected, and you have to communicate that inward, it can really, really throw things off balance, at least in my experience. So it's trying to navigate these intricacies, like how is this external partner communicating with me versus communicating with them, and how can we bring that together? So it can be very convoluted at times, but being a pro at this, working at it every day is critical. Like, how can you translate information for people to better understand, making language accessible, meeting people where they're at, so everyone can move forward in the right direction?
absolutely, absolutely. So you said you started from the beginning, you've worked with lots of nonprofits, and you've seen this work well and not work well. What's something that you've seen happen inside teams that kind of hurt performance?
I see a lot of, and I know I keep tying it back to communication, but communication is important for transparency. And so if you don't have transparency, a lot of people feel like they're not trusted. They feel like they don't know what's going on.
Mm,
There have been organizations that I've been part of, and they're lacking strategic plan. How is that helpful to anyone? Like, what is the mission here? We have the mission, but what are we doing with it? And it's detrimental to those staff because they don't have transparency. They don't know what they're doing. They're just going through the motions because that's what they know they're supposed to do. It's in their description. That really doesn't foster confidence, morale, anything. It kind of dims the passion of people when they don't know what they're doing their job for in the long run.
absolutely. I kind of sort of subtly heard clarity of roles. The leader, this is something I had to learn, and I had to have a coach to teach it to me. But what's in my head as a leader isn't necessarily what the team's hearing. I have this vision, and I can even imagine it. Like I have a visual for it. I know where we want to go. But it took me a long time to realize that where I was going and what I was communicating wasn't as clear as I thought that was in my head as they were receiving it.
Mhm.
What would you tell a leader if they know they've kind of hit that mark?
I tell them that there's a difference between being a manager and a leader, and the leader is communicating well, accepting feedback, asking for that feedback. I often ask my volunteers for feedback on my work, how I'm interacting with them. It's like, what do they think could be improved? Nothing formal survey in my volunteer organization, but I use that feedback. Really value that feedback. And I think if other leaders use that, it would make things so much easier, like understanding how their communication is being received, what their team needs to move forward, to be successful. Making sure a leader understands that managing items, delegating or dictating terms is all right and good in terms of processes, but how is that being received?
Yeah.
That's the difference, is making sure you listen more than talk.
Listen more than talk. I love that. I love that. The idea of communication, clear results, listen more than talk. What are some other elements that you've seen that really help build trust and morale when it comes to teams?
Allowing people to take ownership of things. Oftentimes it can be challenging, especially for me in a volunteer run organization, is giving a volunteer ownership over things that are really important because they're a volunteer. It's like, well, will they meet my expectations because they're not being compensated? But
Mm,
giving that trust, you get it in return. I've seen those in my organization who I've promoted, so to speak, like to different responsibilities and ownership. They their morale has increased substantially, and they're even more committed and offering to do more things. Is because they feel appreciated. They feel that they are trusted and can do these things. It gives them an opportunity to shine. That's not to say I'm like wholeheartedly, I'm just stepping away from the reins. I'm there for them if they need me. I check in multiple times a day, not like micromanaging, but I say, hey, do you need help? And if they respond, no, I'm okay. I'm like, do you want to send me, for example, social media? Like, do you want to send me your social media copy for a review? Like, I help people transition into these roles. So just allowing people some ownership and some autonomy is really important. It really helps an organization thrive, a team thrive, and be healthy.
I like what you say about that because not everybody needs the same kind of help at the same amount of time. But people don't know what they don't know. But like you said, you sat with them. What are even some questions to ask to even know what help someone needs to take on that next level of responsibility?
Well, first, I ask them if they're interested in taking on that responsibility. Then I ask them if they could meet for a quick call because we are hugely remote because we have such a large team. I'll schedule a quick chat with them, just having this conversation with them to make sure they understand what it entails, answering any questions they may have, and then letting them know that I'm there to help them. And say, if you don't feel comfortable reaching out to me, please reach out to this person. I give them alternate contacts because I know not everyone's comfortable coming to the leader of an organization and saying, I need help with this. So I give them other individuals I know who would be able to help them. That's
Mhm.
another critical component, is understanding, as much as I want to be person who's helping, not everyone's always having that same type of relationship with a leader. So it's important to identify other people who would be willing to talk to them, help them out, give them constructive feedback. But just letting everyone know that I'm always there, that they can email, message, schedule a call. I'm there to help.
So I like about that you're available and also you're not the only one. Because
Mm,
sometimes the liability is that we become the bottleneck because
yeah.
we have to be the one doing it. So I wanted to underline that too. That was subtle what you said, but I think very important.
Yes, it is important to not take on everything. It's important to delegate. And at a previous organization, that was one of the challenges there was a huge bottleneck because leadership wanted everything to go through them. It delayed publications, it delayed so many things.
Yeah.
It was a detriment to the organization because there was no trust. It's like you have to trust your team and delegate, otherwise it's not going to get done and your team's going to be frustrated.
Yeah. Uh, we see that over and over and over again. And that if there's nothing else, trust your team and let them make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly.
So with retention, you mentioned the word flexibility. And what are you doing differently around flexibility that's really helping keep retention, keeping productivity?
Yes. So just kind of mentioned a bit earlier is knowing that we have deadlines, but being flexible with the time they have to reach those deadlines. So we're not expecting like a clock in, record the time you spent on this. It's like you can
Hmm.
spend 5 hours or 10 hours, however long it takes you to just get it done. That's fine. Like you can do it on your own time. I appreciate that flexibility. I've had some great employers in the past that have been flexible with deadlines, and seeing that and how much it benefited the people in the organization, myself included, I wanted to bring that to my organization.
Yeah.
When you have flexibility, it makes everything better, honestly. Like if you look at the research, even on like shortening work weeks or doing like hybrid style and remote, and you see productivity go up. Like when you give that flexibility, you can shorten the work week and still you'll see productivity, like meeting those deadlines. I wish I could like reference a particular study, but I have to say my sister is one of those research data scientists who shares all this information with me. There are multiple studies that show productivity increases despite like cutting time spent working or days in office. So just knowing that kind of information and applying it to my work has been extremely beneficial, knowing that you can still have an effective team, a passionate, enthusiastic team without being so demanding.
Wow. Yeah, that you answered that internal question as a leader. I'm like, if I give flexibility, I'm going to lose productivity. Like literally, I felt an anxiousness inside of me. And so I love that you said the studies show that. But it also goes back to the need to communicate well. Because if people know the goals, it's like you can do it any way you want. S- So the bigger picture is there, but and I trust you to do it in your way. So I'm hearing trust, I'm hearing communication, I'm hearing clear communication values and clear goals. Am I missing anything? Like those elements are really important. It's not just being flexible, like, yeah, take off whenever you want. You're combining the flexibility with the urgency somehow.
Yeah. And I think that's also kind of unique to the nonprofit space because we're mission driven. And especially with volunteers, they're going back to what I said at the beginning, they're there because they want to be, not that they need a paycheck. They're there because they want to be. The nonprofit space in general, people don't go into it for the money. Otherwise, we'd all be working in finance, perhaps. You go into it for the mission, and then you stay in it because you enjoy how nonprofits function, like being able to learn so much and wearing multiple hats. Yeah, I've just learned so much in my various roles, and that's kind of why I stayed in operations, is because I can do so many different tasks within an organization. Yeah.
The superhero, the unsung hero. So I'm hearing what you're saying is there's care for people and accountability. And sometimes those feel like I can care for people, which means we're all sitting around talking and drinking coffee and not getting anything done. The accountability feels important in light of that productivity. So, do you have anything to speak on that? That concept of caring for people with accountability?
Yes. So it's been a learning experience with my nonprofit, because going from 7 people to 128, you learn a lot of things. To start with the accountability example, at the beginning we were really flexible, a little too much, that we weren't getting things done, especially since we had so few volunteers. So we had to learn how to hold people accountable, but also be flexible, being mindful that they have their lives outside of volunteering. So we developed the need for like a weekly check-in, see where they're at. And then we developed optional biweekly meetings for all the team to come in. We do weekly email updates to people, just making sure everyone has organizational wide updates, but that they can respond to the appropriate individual for certain things. Also, just reminding people I'm there. Other people are there to have these conversations, fostering that communication, making sure that people are communicating appropriately. If they're not meeting the expectations, which, I mean, as a volunteer, we're very, I keep saying it, flexible, but it's true. We don't put this hard task on them where they have to meet this or they're just out. But we give them chances to communicate with us. If they fail to communicate, that's when it's a problem. And that's when we hold them accountable. We have a process where we check in and say, haven't heard from you. Are you still interested in volunteering with us? Please let us know either way. We still don't hear, we send one more email and then let them know, if we don't hear from you, we'll be offboarding you as a volunteer. So that seems to work well in our process, just holding people accountable in that way, just letting them know that if we don't hear from you, you're no longer a volunteer with us, unfortunately.
Wow. So there takes a little bit of adulting along with it.
A little bit, because again, volunteers aren't being compensated, so you have to like ensure that they're still wanting to even be there, because it's wasting everyone's time if they don't want to be there. So communicate it to us. This was an internal discussion, but decided a few years ago to do a requirement of a minimum 6 months time commitment. We just want consistency. We want not someone who comes in for a few weeks and then just disappears. It's a lot of work. We want someone committed to the mission, someone who's going to stay. And if you commit at least 6 months, we give you a letter of recommendation. So that's a motivating factor. Something that we've been trying out the past few years, as I mentioned, and it's been really effective, because people really want to make an impact and then get a letter of recommendation for
Mhm.
their role with us. And high retention, we have people like their commitment can change after that 6 months. They can contribute less amount of time, but people stay on, which is really exciting. I like having people stay. It's rewarding knowing that people are really connected to the work that we do.
Yeah. How do you communicate that vision? How do you make that a strategic plan that you put up on your bulletin board rather than in your desk? How do you really communicate what you're doing and why you're doing it?
This just goes to the continual communication I put out. I do a weekly email now with updates. I didn't used to do that, but we have these optional biweekly meetings. We call them biweekly meetings and social hour, because we go over updates and then we just converse. We have conversations about a variety of things, not necessarily always related to human rights, which is what we do. But for those who can't attend because of the different time zones, we have think people representing 28 different countries in our organization. It's hard to find a good time for everyone, so we do 2 different sessions. And then I started doing these emails as updates. Here's for the people who couldn't attend. This is what we're doing, what we're working on. Our goal is to do this by the end of June, just as an example. Like letting them know where we're at, letting them know who joined the team or who's leaving, any successes, any requesting feedback on projects, things like that. Just having that all put together and summarized in an email has been helpful.
So that email sounded like it started from a pain point.
Yeah, just making sure people knew what was going on because we've made updates to internal processes, like for our editorial team and researchers, like how they have to submit things and like what steps they follow, making updates to our AI use guide and making sure everyone sees it. Yeah, we have different ways of communicating. Some people prefer using our Slack messaging workspace. Other people prefer emails, and then we have virtual chats. So again, this goes back to communicating on different levels. Like people have different preferences.
Sorry, you see me wince because like there's so many. Yeah, there's multiple email sources and Slack and WhatsApp and Signal, and so I would emphasize too, like pick one of each type, right? I think too many communication avenues is almost as bad as not enough.
Yes, we do Slack and email, and then anyone who wants to join the biweekly meetings.
Even on my team, we had a 12-hour time zone. So there's no one that's, there's both sides are going to get cheated. In the middle, we did fine to really think through the 2 different ones.
Well, and it's especially challenging too when you're dealing with volunteers because a lot of people are in school or working full time. So like even scheduling just one session, keeping in mind that people are probably still in at work right now. So
Yeah.
it's proved challenging, but the 2 sessions has been great. We get a pretty decent turnout.
Is there anything you want to leave us with when it comes to building healthy teams? The time and energy it takes to do it really is going to benefit the mission.
Be an active listener. It's so important to ask people how they feel, what they want to see. As a leader, it's so important to ask those questions and to listen, not interrupt, do more listening than talking, as I like to say, and actually take that input and incorporate it into how you lead.
Yes.
Don't just listen and not do anything with the information. Actually use it. It's so important if you want to have your team functioning, if you want to understand what works for employee retention and morale. It takes so much more energy to offboard, recruit, hire, onboard, and train a new person rather than to keep the existing talent that you have. And that can be solved by just listening.
Wow. Well said. That's a deep impact because we forget about the cost of turnover, including morale and time and money and everything else. We do have the time to listen. We do have the time to think through communication. In fact, what I'm hearing you say is the cost is way too high not to be proactive with communication.
Agreed. It really is.
I shouldn't ask you this because we need to stop, but what are activities that you do to help build or bond a team?
Well, aside from our biweekly meetings, I always try, we have in our Slack system, our workspace, I have created a channel for pictures of pets.
There we go.
Yeah, we have to share pets, cute animals, things like that, because especially when you're working with human rights, there are some
Yeah.
heavy topics, and like we're trying to make an impact, positive impact, and some people are more affected by their work than others, and it's important to know that there's still good in the world, and it's that we're fighting for good, that we're making impact with our awareness building and educating others. So it's important to have cute pets and videos to get you through the day.
Absolutely. And that is really important, but being able to lighten things when it's heavy is really valuable. But
It
yeah, give
is.
us a little bit of what your organization does.
Yes, so Human Rights Research Center, also known as HRRC, we're a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary organization that focuses on making research more accessible, bridging the gap between the academic and the wider public. So we have people from so many different disciplines, and they convey research in a certain way using particular jargon that maybe you and I might not even understand. And I'm running the organization, but making that information more accessible so everyone can understand because these are critical issues. We have people requirements, doing glossary of terms, in-text hyperlinks are encouraged. Currently working on transcribing audio reports. We do different mediums, not just written reports. We do visuals. Not everyone consumes information the same way, so it's important to share it in different ways as well. So we pride ourselves in taking this academic information and making it more accessible, in addition to using that to impact legislation and policy making. Yeah.
So important. If someone wants to volunteer or be part of what you're doing, what would they do?
Yeah, so we are recruiting. Our website is humanrightsresearch.org, and there's more information on that website about how you can get involved with us.
I love it. So it sounds like even if you're home and maybe can't work, maybe you have a disability that doesn't allow you to have a full-time job, you can still volunteer.
Yes, and there's no ageism either. We don't discriminate. We have people who are retirees contributing to us. We have a retired professor who's doing research with us because he wants to. It really doesn't matter. Just send an application.
And I love that. And then that's one cool thing about volunteering that I think we forget is a lot of times we think, oh, to volunteer, I have to go build a house or I have to do something maybe physical. But really, you find your niche, find your passion, and see what is there to help. I love spending time with you. Thank you so much. We'll have you back. And thank you everyone for watching What Works. Until then, lead with calm, lead with compassion, and make sure you communicate. Thank you
Yep.
so much.